Senator Cardin, the ranking member, comment this morning. I think that's at the center of one of our problems, is that we've got to coordinate how we fund these departments, and the people who really understand these departments and have the right or responsibility of oversight need to be involved in that process. I could not agree more, and we're working to try to see how we can change that. Madam Secretary, thank you for being here. It's always a pleasure. Thank you for your courtesies last week by sending over Hari Satri and Doug Pitkin. They did a great job talking about budget requests in our subcommittee. I just have 3 quick questions. One is, just to put a little historical perspective on this, and let me give a little context. The way I look at it, with the last 7 years, and this is not a partisan comment, it's just a reality, that we've borrowed over 1/3 of what we spend as a federal government. And if you look at about 2/3 of our spending is mandatory. So if those dollars that we get in go to mandatory first, that means that every dollar we spend on defense and state and aid is fundamentally borrowed. So that means there's a real crisis here that we need to look at what we're doing with what we're spending. And the perspective is that in between 92 and 2000, the state in all of its endeavors averaged about $20 billion a year in expense over that 8-year period. And then between 2000 and 2008, while we averaged 30, it went from 20 to 40. And a lot of that was Iraq, Afghanistan, and other things. And since then, we've fallen into this level of about 50. And by the way, I have to call out that you're asking for less money this year than you asked for last year. So I have to call that out, and thank you for that. So I have that observation, and the second observation is the fact that while that level stayed at about 50, the enduring dropped from 50 to 40 over that period of time and was filled with OCO. So you've already answered the OCO part of that, but I have the second piece of that, and that is, help me understand the responsibilities and what we're doing around the world. I recognize we're the most philanthropic country in the world, and we need to maintain that position as long as we can afford it, but I'm just not sure right now that we shouldn't ask the question, can we afford all this? And so it's incumbent on you, as the budget process comes about, to justify how we've gone from 20 to 40 or 30 and then now to 50. How explain that to me just a little bit in terms of your, I know you didn't take it from 20 to 50. You've been given a challenge to use 50, and you've kept it flat pretty much. But help me with that historical perspective on how we're spending that much.
So, Senator, I think you touched on a few elements of it, which are Iraq and Afghanistan, that have that required increases in our budget and require increases to sustain our engagement there. I would point to a couple of other factors as being those that we need to fund, and that is that we are dealing with an increasingly complex world. If you just take the humanitarian side for a moment, we have 4 level 3 humanitarian disasters, and that's I can't say if it's unprecedented, but it's highly unusual, and we are a very generous contributor to those crises. We also have the rise of violent extremism and terrorism in ways that are different than we saw during the periods of time you're referencing. And I don't know if those numbers include supplemental funding appropriations, but we did, as a regular course, rely on and utilize supplementals to address the emerging crises. So I think each of those plays a role in that. But Senator, we'd be pleased to sort of go through in more detail some of the...
Yeah, I think it would be instructive, because I think this is a function that every department over the next couple of years is going to have to go through in terms of what we really can afford to do. It's a question we don't ask much up here. I have a second question quickly on the IG. Last year we talked privately, and you testified about this, and I know you've been very vocal about this, but as I look at it, I don't see a lot of progress, honestly. And so can you address the progress that you're making with that, with regard to specifically the request of the IG? And I think there was no disagreement last year about having the IG be aware of all investigations. There are evidently three pathways investigations go inside state. Can you speak to that just a minute?
Sure, I'd be pleased to. We have been working with the IG to identify which of the issues, which of the investigations, which type of cases they are most interested in having information about and having the ability to investigate should they choose. They can investigate anything, but where we narrow their focus, so that the processes we have of an administrative nature, if someone wants to bring a civil rights case to our Office of Civil Rights, it's clear that the IG's office isn't necessarily interested in that, and we're engaged in those discussions right now.
Is the IG aware now of all of the potential investigations? So they are now aware?
So the conversation we're having with them right now is to look across all of the different avenues people have to bring, even approaching the ombudsman and say, what cases are you interested in? Defining that, and then working through a process. And I won't speak for him because that wouldn't be appropriate, but I do, as you know, meet regularly with him, and I think he's also pleased with the progress. And I think very soon we'll have a policy that we've agreed upon and that we can explain and make easily understandable to our employees.
I think that would be important. And lastly, before my time's out, I know as we travel the world, as the chairman mentioned, it's one of the great benefits of this responsibility is that you do see great Americans out there in the field, and I have to echo what everybody said. I just marvel at the quality of people and their dedication around the world, and I know we have to make them secure. And I know post-Benghazi there's been an uptick in that. There are some 4 major embassies construction. Can you talk about embassy construction and the overruns on those, and particularly Islamabad, London, Singapore, places like that, where I know these are billion-dollar-plus installations now. We have to have stronger buffer zones or offsets. Can you speak to that just a minute, please?
Sure. Senator, you touched on one of the issues that's most important when we think about embassy construction, and that's building facilities that are safe and secure for our personnel. And post the bombings in the 90s and more recent events, we continually review and look at what our requirements are and make sure that we can do that. And in places where it's more dangerous to operate, those costs can be more expensive. So Islamabad would be an example. And where we have posts that house a lot of different agencies, we have different requirements to meet that.
That's another question I'd like to dial into at some point. I know in Singapore there's some 19 different government agencies that have offices and personnel over there, and I would really love to know the purpose of those. And that may not be under your purview, but at some point over the next few months, I'd love to see what those areas of responsibilities are.
We'd be pleased to do that for you, Senator, at any of our posts. And I think when you travel, as you have to our embassies and our posts, and you have a chance to sit with the country team, you get a flavor for which of the different opportunities are having our agencies there make sense. But it is expensive, and we do have to work through what those requirements are.
Are you experiencing serious overruns? Oh, that's really what I was going for.
I think it depends on a case-by-case basis. I wouldn't say in general, because in some cases we have a budget, we go out, we bid, and we come under budget. In other cases, for various reasons, the costs are in excess of what we projected. So it depends, and it depends on some circumstances. But we could provide you with our most recent set of construction plans and budgets, and provide some additional.
I don't need to see the plans. I trust you on that, but maybe the budget numbers.
I meant budget plans.
Thank you very much.